September 23rd, 1935. Two boys stumble through the overgrown weeds of Kingsbury Run, Cleveland, chasing a game that ends in a scream. They're laughing at first, kicking stones, daring each other to venture deeper into the scrubland. Then they see it, a shape that doesn't belong. A body, sprawled in the dirt, headless, sliced apart with surgical precision, abandoned like trash among the thistles. The blood's long dried, staining the earth a sickly brown, but the terror is fresh, radiating from the scene like a pulse. This isn't a random killing, a drunken brawl gone wrong. It's the mark of something darker, something deliberate, something that's been waiting in the shadows for its moment to strike. They didn't know it then, standing there frozen, but the Cleveland torso murderer had already begun his reign. A phantom who'd leave a trail of severed lives across this broken city. A nightmare that even Eliot Ness, the legend who brought down Al Capone, couldn't stop. 12 bodies, maybe more. No names, no mercy, just torsos and questions that still claw at us today, nearly a century later. Dare to follow me into this nightmare? Because once you step in, there's no turning back. The story begins in Cleveland, Ohio during the 1930s. A city battered by the Great Depression, its streets lined with factories belching smoke and despair, its people clinging to whatever scraps of hope they could find. Cleveland wasn't a place of dreams back then. It was a machine grinding down the weary, a landscape of steel and soot where survival was a daily fight. And nowhere was that fight harder than in Kingsbury Run. This wasn't a neighborhood of manicured lawns or bustling shops. It was a wasteland, a jagged scar of land cutting through the city's underbelly, a maze of ravines and railroad tracks where the forgotten gathered. Shanty towns sprouted like weeds here, flimsy shelters of tarp and tin housing vagrants, prostitutes, drifters. People the world had turned its back on. The air stank of coal, dust, and rot. The ground was slick with mud, and the river nearby churned with filth. Kingsbury Run was a place where life was cheap, where you could vanish without a trace. And someone noticed. It was here, in this forgotten corner, that a killer found his hunting ground. He didn't care about fame or wealth. He didn't stalk the elite in their downtown offices or the families in their modest homes. He preyed on the invisible, those society wouldn't miss until it was too late. The ones who slipped through the cracks, who slept under bridges and begged for coins, who traded their last dime for a bottle or a fleeting escape. But when they disappeared, they didn't stay gone. They came back. Not whole, not alive, but in pieces, scattered across Cleveland like a grim warning. And that's when the city realized it wasn't safe anymore. Not even for the lost. The first official victim, or at least the first they found, was a man, unidentified, discovered that September day in 1935. The boys who stumbled on him ran home screaming, their innocence shattered by what they'd seen. His head was gone, severed clean at the neck, his body drained of blood and neatly dismembered. Arms and legs detached with a precision that chilled the cops who arrived on the scene. The cuts weren't wild or jagged. They were methodical, almost artistic, like the work of someone who knew anatomy inside out. A doctor, maybe with a scalpel and a steady hand? A butcher used to carving flesh from bone? No one could say for sure. The head was never found, and without it, the man's story stayed silent. Days later, another body surfaced near the river. A woman this time, her torso hacked apart with that same eerie skill, her identity erased along with her face. The pieces didn't fit together, not in life or in death. By 1936, the killings weren't a fluke anymore, they were a pattern. Bodies, or parts of them, kept appearing. Under bridges, in abandoned lots, floating down the Cuyahoga River like gruesome deliveries from the shadows. 12 victims would be officially linked to the killer, though whispers of others, unreported, unclaimed, echoed through the city's back alleys. Men and women, young and old, all reduced to fragments, their humanity stripped away with each cut. The killer didn't just take lives, he erased identities. Heads vanished, making fingerprints useless, leaving families. If they even had families, with nothing to bury, nothing to mourn. The press caught wind and ran wild. The Mad Butcher, they called him, a name that stuck like blood on a blade. But it didn't capture the dread that seeped into Cleveland's bones. This wasn't chaos or rage. This was calculated, cold, a game played by a mind that thrived on control. Cleveland wasn't ready for this. No city could be. The police scrambled, chasing shadows in a place where shadows were everywhere. The public panicked, locking doors that hadn't been locked in years, eyeing strangers with suspicion. Kingsbury Run, once ignored, became a name synonymous with fear, a place where the ground itself seemed cursed. And as the body count rose, one question gnawed at everyone. Who was doing this? A monster? A man? Something worse? The answer wouldn't come easy, if it came at all. This is where our story takes root. A city on edge, a killer in the shadows, and a mystery that would defy the greatest minds of its time. We're just getting started. The Cleveland torso murderer didn't stop with a body or two. He built a legacy of terror, one cut at a time. And the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Are you ready to see what's next? Because this is only the beginning, and the Mad Butcher's tale is far from over. Let's step closer to the butcher's table. Closer than you might want, but you're here now, aren't you? Picture this. A body laid out like a puzzle under a dim, flickering light. Not a corpse left in haste, not a victim of some reckless fury. No, this is different. Every cut is deliberate, every slice a statement, carved with a hand that knows its craft. The Cleveland torso murderer wasn't sloppy. He didn't hack in a frenzy like some alley thug. He dissected slowly, meticulously, with a precision that turned death into something else. Something almost like art. Detectives stood over these remains, their faces pale, their stomachs churning. They'd seen death before, gunshots, stabbings, bar fights gone wrong. But this was new. This was personal. Take Edward Andersey, one of the few victims they could put a name to. Found in September 1935, just days after those boys stumbled across the first body in Kingsbury Run. Andersey was 28, a small-time hustler with a reputation for trouble. Someone who drifted through Cleveland's underbelly, charming his way into bars and debts. When they found him, he wasn't charming anymore. His head was gone, severed clean at the neck with a blade so sharp it barely left a jagged edge. His body had been drained of blood, the skin pale and waxy, almost translucent under the morning sun. His wrists and ankles were cut away, detached with a surgeon's finesse, the joints separated as if by someone who'd done this before, many times. Nearby, another corpse lay in the weeds. Unidentified, a man, his body mirroring Andersey's fate down to the last chilling detail. The killer hadn't rushed. He'd lingered, maybe even savored it, leaving the pieces arranged just so, like a message no one could yet read. Then there was Flo Polillo, a woman whose life had been as broken as the city around her. In January 1936, a shopkeeper found parts of her behind his store, wrapped in burlap sacks like discarded meat. Her torso was there, hacked into pieces, but her head was gone, lost, like so many others, to the killer's obsession. Days later, her arms and legs turned up in a vacant lot across town, scattered like breadcrumbs in a sick, twisted game. Flo was no stranger to the streets, her days spent scraping by, her nights blurred by booze and desperation. But to the Mad Butcher, she wasn't a person. She was a canvas, her body reshaped by his blade with the same cold skill he'd shown before. The police tried to piece her back together, but without her head, Flo's story ended in fragments, her identity reduced to a case number. What set this killer apart wasn't just the body count, though 12 confirmed victims, men and women, young and old, was enough to paralyze Cleveland with fear. It was the method, the ritual of it all. Some victims were beheaded while still alive, their necks bearing the jagged, desperate marks of a struggle cut short. Others were drained of blood, their bodies cleaned and almost preserved, as if the killer wanted them to last, to be found in a state of grotesque perfection. The cuts were too precise for an amateur. Bones parted at the joints, tendons sliced with a single stroke, flesh peeled back with a clarity that spoke of training, maybe even pride. Experts were called in, their brows furrowed as they studied the remains. Was he a surgeon, Schooled in the delicate dance of scalpel and suture? A slaughterhouse worker, numb to the gore of a kill floor? A hunter at ease with dressing his prey? The evidence screamed skill, but the savagery, the sheer audacity of it, hinted at a mind unmoored, a soul lost to its own darkness. By 1937, the killings had become a grim rhythm, a heartbeat Cleveland couldn't escape. Bodies, or parts of them, kept surfacing, under bridges, in alleys, bobbing in the Cuyahoga River like offerings to some forgotten god. One victim, a woman, was found in a sewer, her torso split open with a force that made even seasoned cops turn away. Another, a man, washed ashore in 1936, his legs discovered miles apart, as if the killer was taunting the city with his reach. The river became a graveyard, its currents hiding secrets the police couldn't drag to shore. Kingsbury Run itself seemed cursed, its muddy banks swallowing screams no one heard. The body count wasn't just numbers. It was a mounting weight, pressing down on a city already cracking under the Depression's strain. The police were drowning in their own helplessness. Every new discovery brought more questions, fewer answers. Detectives combed Kingsbury Run, their boots sinking in the mire, their flashlights catching nothing but rats and shadows. They interviewed drifters, barflies, anyone who'd ever set foot near the run, but the leads crumbled like ash. The killer was a ghost, slipping through the cracks of a city too fractured to hold him. He didn't leave fingerprints, didn't drop a matchbook with his name scrawled inside. All he left were bodies, torn apart, rearranged, discarded with a carelessness that mocked the men chasing him. And the public? They were terrified. Newspapers screamed warnings, parents forbade their kids from wandering alone, and the homeless vanished from the streets, afraid of becoming the next offering. But fear wasn't the only thing spreading. Anger was rising, too. Cleveland demanded answers, someone to blame, someone to punish. The police chief faced daily grilling from reporters, his promises sounding hollower with each new body. City Hall squirmed under the pressure, and the mayor's office fielded letters from citizens who saw the killer in every stranger's face. Into the storm stepped Eliot Ness, the Untouchables hero who'd brought down Al Capone with a ledger and a headline. As Cleveland's public safety director, Ness was supposed to be the city's savior, the man who'd end this nightmare with the same grit that toppled a mob empire. But this wasn't Chicago, and the Mad Butcher wasn't a gangster you could cuff in a raid. He was something else, something Ness wasn't prepared for. Ness took to the streets, his jaw set, his mind racing. He vowed to catch the killer, to restore order to a city unraveling at the seams. But as 1937 bled into 1938, the bodies kept coming, each one a taunt, each one a reminder that the Mad Butcher was winning. The question wasn't just who he was, it was how he kept doing this, right under the noses of Cleveland's finest. How do you catch a man who leaves no face behind, no name to trace, nothing but pieces that refuse to speak? This is the heart of the torso murderer's terror. Not just death, but destruction, a dismantling of everything that makes a person whole. He didn't just kill, he erased, and he did it with a skill that haunts us still. We've seen his work now, the bodies he left behind. But who was the man holding the blade? That's where we're going next. Stay with me. The hunt is about to begin, and it's going to take us deeper into the dark than you might expect. Eliot Ness wasn't a man who backed down. He toppled Al Capone's empire in Chicago with grit, a team of untouchables, and a knack for turning ledgers into handcuffs. By the time he arrived in Cleveland as public safety director, his name carried weight, a promise of justice, a beacon for a city drowning in fear. He'd faced down mobsters with Tommy guns and bravado, but in 1936, as the Cleveland torso murderer's body count climbed, Ness stepped into a different kind of war. This wasn't a battle of bullets or bribes. This was a chase through shadows, a hunt for a killer who didn't play by any rules Ness knew. The Mad Butcher wasn't a kingpin you could corner in a speakeasy. He was a specter with a blade, and he was winning. By 1938, Ness was desperate. Cleveland had become a pressure cooker, its people simmering with terror and rage. The newspapers wouldn't let up. Every headless torso splashed across the front page was another jab at the police, another demand for answers. The mayor leaned on Ness hard, the public leaned harder, and the bodies kept turning up, under bridges, in the river, scattered like taunts across Kingsbury Run. 12 confirmed victims, maybe more, and not a single solid lead. Ness had vowed to end this nightmare when he took the job, but the killer mocked him with every severed limb, every empty crime scene. The city was unraveling, and Ness was the man everyone looked to or blamed. When the sun went down and the fear crept in, Ness turned Kingsbury Run upside down. He sent his men into the muck, detectives in mud-caked shoes, pounding on shanty doors, dragging in anyone who looked remotely suspicious. Vagrants with shaky alibis, petty crooks with bloodshot eyes, drifters who'd slept too close to the river. They all faced the glare of Ness's interrogation rooms, but nothing stuck. The killer didn't leave witnesses, didn't drop a wallet or a cigarette, but his trail was a line of corpses, cold and silent, and every raid came up empty. Ness pushed harder, his frustration boiling over. He couldn't let Cleveland see him falter. Not after Chicago, not after Capone. But the Mad Butcher wasn't giving him a fight he could win with fists or headlines. Then, in August 1938, Ness made a move that would haunt him. Desperate to flush the killer out, he ordered Kingsbury Run torched. Hundreds of shacks, flimsy homes to the city's poorest, went up in flames, set ablaze by his own men under his command. The logic was brutal. Burn the killer's hunting ground, drive him into the open, force him to slip up. Black smoke choked the sky, embers rained down, and the displaced, hundreds of them, watched their lives reduced to ash. Ness stood by, his face hard, betting that chaos would break the Mad Butcher's rhythm. But it didn't. The killings didn't stop, and the backlash was immediate. The homeless cursed his name, calling him a tyrant, not a savior. Newspapers turned on him, branding the raid a reckless failure. Cleveland's hope flickered with those flames, and Ness's gamble left him with nothing but scorched earth and angry ghosts. But there was one lead, a name that kept surfacing through the haze of dead ends. Dr. Francis Sweeney. A former surgeon, Sweeney was a wreck of a man. Alcoholic, erratic, teetering on the edge of sanity. He lived near Kingsbury Run, close enough to smell the river's rot, and his medical training fit the killer's profile like a glove. Those clean cuts, those precise dissections. Sweeney had the hands for it, the knowledge to turn a body into pieces with chilling accuracy. Ness zeroed in, bringing him in for questioning in 1938. The interrogation stretched over days, Ness and his team circling Sweeney like wolves, probing every crack in his story. They strapped him to a polygraph twice and watched the needles jump. He failed both times, his answers slippery, his demeanor unraveling. He'd laugh at odd moments, dodge questions with tangents, his bloodshot eyes darting around the room. Ness smelled guilt, but he needed more. Something concrete to tie Sweeney to the bodies. Yet Sweeney walked free. Why? Some say political strings were pulled. Sweeney's cousin was a congressman with clout, a man who could lean on the right people to keep the doctor out of cuffs. Others argue Ness lacked hard evidence. No bloody knife, no witness, just a gut feeling and those damning polygraph spikes. The law tied Ness's hands, and Sweeney slipped through them, a shadow retreating into the dark. Days after his release, he checked himself into a mental hospital, claiming exhaustion, claiming voices, claiming anything but the truth. And then, something strange happened. The killing slowed. Not stopped, not entirely, but the relentless pace of the Mad Butcher's spree faltered. Coincidence? Or had Ness gotten close enough to rattle the killer, to drive him underground? Cleveland held its breath, waiting for the next torso to surface, praying it wouldn't. Ness didn't celebrate. He couldn't. Sweeney was a lead, not a victory, and the case gnawed at him like a wound that wouldn't heal. He'd chased Capone with a playbook, tax evasion, raids, informants, but the torso murderer gave him no playbook, no rules to bend. Ness's men kept scouring the city, their morale sinking with every empty sweep. The public's faith in him eroded, replaced by whispers that he'd lost his edge, that Cleveland had broken the unbreakable. The raid on Kingsbury Run became his albatross, a bold move that backfired, a scar on his legacy. And still, The bodies lingered in his mind. Headless, nameless, a gallery of failures he couldn't unsee. The hunt wasn't over, but it was changing. By late 1938, the rhythm of the killings shifted, fewer discoveries, longer gaps. Some said the Mad Butcher had moved on, drifting to another city, another river to stain with blood. Others believed he'd burrowed deeper into Cleveland, watching, waiting. Ness kept Sweeney in his sights, even as the doctor faded into the asylum's walls. Detectives tailed him when they could, but the trail grew cold, literally and figuratively. Winter settled over the city, blanketing Kingsbury Run in snow, hiding whatever secrets the ashes hadn't burned away. Ness stood at a crossroads. Push harder and risk another misstep, or step back and let the case fester. The question burned hotter than ever. Was Sweeney the man? His profile fit: surgeon, alcoholic, unstable, living on the edge of the killing fields. The polygraph failures, his breakdown, the timing of his retreat. It all pointed to him, a neon arrow in Ness's sleepless nights. But doubt lingered. A killer that careful, that skilled, wouldn't crack so easily under questioning, or would he? Ness couldn't shake the feeling that Sweeney knew more than he'd let on. That his laughter in that interrogation room was a taunt, not a breakdown. Yet without proof, Ness was stuck. A hunter with a scent but no quarry. Cleveland didn't care about feelings or hunches. The city wanted closure, a name, a face, a man in chains. Ness couldn't deliver. His reputation took a hit, the shine of Chicago dulled by Cleveland's mud. The torso murderer became his white whale, an obsession he couldn't shake, a shadow he couldn't pin down. The police kept working, combing through tips, rechecking crime scenes, but the momentum was gone. The Mad Butcher had outlasted them, outsmarted them, and the hunt was bleeding into something else. A mystery with no end in sight. This was Eliot Ness's fight. A clash of will against a killer who thrived on chaos. He'd faced down gangsters and won, but the Mad Butcher was a different beast. One that didn't fight fair. We've seen the bodies, the craft of the killings. Now we've seen the hunt and how it faltered. But who was the man behind the blade? Was it Sweeney, smirking from his hospital bed? Or someone else, still lurking in the shadows? That's where we're headed next. The theories are piling up, and the truth, if it's there, won't come easy. Stick with me. The deeper we dig, the more questions we unearth. So who was he? The Cleveland torso murderer left no manifesto, no scrawled confession to pin to a police board. He didn't carve his initials into his victims or send taunting letters to the press. All he left was his work. Bodies dismantled with a surgeon's precision, scattered across Cleveland like pieces of a puzzle no one could solve. 12 confirmed kills, maybe 20, maybe more, and not a single thread tied back to a name. But that didn't stop the theories from swirling, rising like smoke over Kingsbury Run, thick with speculation and desperation. The city wanted answers. Ness wanted answers. And with every dead end, the guesses grew wilder, the shadows deeper. Let's walk through them, because the truth, if it's there, hides in the cracks of what we think we know. Dr. Francis Sweeney sits at the top of the list, a name that stuck to the case like blood on a blade. A former surgeon, Sweeney was a man falling apart by the time Eliot Ness dragged him into that interrogation room in 1938. Alcohol had hollowed him out, his hands trembling from drink or guilt, or both. He lived near Kingsbury Run, close enough to hear the trains rumble past, close enough to slip into its shadows unnoticed. His training matched the killer's craft, those clean cuts, those dissections that turned flesh into fragments with chilling ease. Ness saw it in him, the skill, the instability, the proximity. Sweeney failed 2 polygraph tests, his answers dodging and weaving, his laughter sharp and unhinged. He'd been a doctor once, a man who saved lives, but by the late 30s, he was a wreck, divorced, drifting, a shadow of himself. And then, after Ness let him go, he checked into a mental hospital, claiming exhaustion or madness or whatever story kept the questions at bay. The killings slowed after that. Fewer torsos, fewer headlines. Was it him? Had Ness rattled the Mad Butcher enough to drive him into hiding? Or was Sweeney just a broken man caught in the wrong spotlight? The pieces fit too well for some, But there was no smoking gun, no bloody scalpel in his closet. Just a hunch, a failed test, and a silence that felt too convenient. But Sweeney wasn't the only name in the frame. There was Frank Dolezal, a butcher by trade, arrested in 1939 after a tip pointed his way. Dolezal was a rough character, gruff, hard-drinking, the kind of man who'd fit in Kingsbury Run's gritty corners. He had the tools, the strength, and a temper that flared like a match. The police hauled him in, and under pressure, he confessed. Said he'd killed Flo Polillo, claimed it was an accident gone wrong. But then he recanted, swearing it was a lie beaten out of him by cops desperate for a win. Before anyone could sort truth from fiction, Dolezal died in his cell. Hanged, officially a suicide, though bruises on his body whispered of something uglier. Was he the Mad Butcher framed to close the case? A scapegoat for a city tired of fear? Or just another dead end? A man who knew too much or too little to live? His death muddied the waters, leaving more questions than answers, and the killings didn't stop cleanly enough to call him the end. Then there's the wilder theory. What if it wasn't one man? What if the torso murderer was a pair or a pack working in tandem? The precision of the cuts screamed skill, but the sheer volume, the randomness of the victims, felt impulsive, chaotic. Could two killers, one with the blade, one with the plan, have prowled Kingsbury Run together? A surgeon and a butcher, maybe, or a mastermind and a mule. The idea stretched thin, but it lingered. Cleveland was a big city, and the Depression bred desperation in pairs as often as alone. The bodies kept coming, even as suspects like Sweeney and Dolezal faded, and that gnawed at investigators. One man could be careful, but two might cover more ground, dodge more eyes. It's a long shot, a whisper in the dark, but it's there, haunting the edges of the case. And what if the Mad Butcher didn't stop at all? By 1939, Cleveland's torso count tapered off. No more headlines, no more riverbank horrors. But similar crimes popped up elsewhere. In Pennsylvania, headless bodies turned up in the 1940s, cut with a familiar finesse. In California, the Black Dahlia murder in 1947 echoed the butcher's style, dismemberment, precision, a victim left on display. Was he a drifter, riding the rails with the Depression's lost, carrying his blade to new hunting grounds? Or did he refine his craft, learning to hide his work better, burying the pieces where no one would look? Some say he died, Sweeney in his asylum, Dolezal in his cell, but others swear he lived on, a ghost who outgrew Cleveland's spotlight. The death masks, plaster casts of unidentified victims, sat in a museum, staring blankly at anyone who dared wonder. Were they his final word, or just the start of a longer, quieter spree? The evidence, or lack of it, feeds every theory and none. The Mad Butcher didn't slip up like most killers. No bloody shirt left behind, no witness to point a finger. He was meticulous, a shadow who knew Cleveland's veins, the river, the rails, the alleys where no one lingered. Sweeney fits the profile, but his freedom gnaws at the story. Why let a killer walk unless he wasn't one? Dolezal's death smells like a cover-up, but his confession was shaky, a house of cards that fell too fast. The team theory explains the scale, but it's a stretch with no names to back it. And the wandering killer idea, tempting, chilling, leans on crimes too scattered to connect with certainty. The truth is, we don't know. We can't. The Mad Butcher erased his tracks with every cut, leaving Cleveland to guess and grieve. Ness never shook the case. It clung to him, a stain on his legend. He chased theories, Sweeney most of all, but walked away empty-handed, the hunter out-hunted. The police files grew thick with notes, maps, dead ends, but no closure. The public moved on, or tried to, as the Depression gave way to war and new fears. Kingsbury Run stayed quiet, its shanties gone, its secrets buried under snow and time. But the questions didn't fade. Was Sweeney the man, laughing from his hospital bed as Ness paced the streets? Was Dolezal a pawn, silenced to calm the storm? Or was the killer someone else entirely? A nobody who slipped into history's cracks, smirking at the chaos he'd sown? Theories are all we have, threads that tangle more than they tie. The Mad Butcher could have been a doctor, a butcher, a drifter, a duo. He could have died in Cleveland or lived to kill again. The death masks watch us still, plaster faces of the lost, daring us to name their maker. But they don't speak, and neither does he. This is the torment of the case. A killer so careful, so cruel, that he took his truth with him, wherever he went. Cleveland's nightmare didn't end with an arrest or a grave. It ended with silence, a void that echoes louder than any confession could. We've walked through the bodies, the hunt, and now the guesses. The Mad Butcher's shadow stretches long. Over Ness, over Cleveland, over us. But what does it mean? What's left when the killer vanishes and the questions stay? That's where we're going next. The legacy of this unseen monster isn't in the answers. It's in the scars he carved into a city, into history. Stay with me, we're almost at the end, but the end isn't what you might expect. The Mad Butcher's story doesn't close. It lingers, and it's up to you to decide what it leaves behind. The Cleveland torso murderer didn't just kill. He carved a scar into history, a wound that never fully healed. 12 lives confirmed, maybe 20, maybe more, snuffed out, hacked apart, and scattered across a city that couldn't stop him. No arrests, no justice, just pieces of a puzzle that won't fit, fragments of people who'll never be whole again. Eliot Ness died in 1957, his heart giving out long after the case had drained his spirit. Kingsbury Run is gone now, its shanties leveled, its ravines paved over by progress, highways and concrete where blood once stained the mud. But the ghosts linger, whispering through the years, refusing to let Cleveland forget. The Mad Butcher's legacy isn't in a solved file or a name on a headstone. It's in the questions, the what-ifs, the shadows he left behind. This is where his story ends, not with answers but with echoes. Think about those victims. Nameless, faceless, erased by a blade that didn't care who they'd been. Edward Andrassy, a hustler with a quick smile, reduced to a torso in the weeds. Flo Polillo, a woman worn down by life, her pieces wrapped in sacks like butcher's scraps. And the others, 10, 12, maybe dozens, men and women who drifted through Kingsbury Run, invisible until they were gone. They weren't rich or powerful. They were the lost, the ones society stepped over on its way to somewhere else. The Mad Butcher made them matter, but not in life, in death, in the horror of what he did to them. Their stories ended in his hands, but their echoes keep the case alive, a chorus of the silence that still begs to be heard. Why did he do it? That's the question that gnaws at us, the splinter we can't pull out. Was it revenge? A man lashing out at a world that broke him? Madness. A mind so twisted it saw beauty in dismemberment? Or something colder, a twisted art, a need to control what he cut apart? The precision of his work, the clean cuts, the drained bodies suggests purpose, not chaos. He wasn't sloppy or impulsive. He planned, he executed, he vanished. Some killers crave attention, taunting notes, trophies, but the Mad Butcher didn't. He let the bodies speak, and they screamed loud enough to shake Cleveland to its core. Maybe that was enough for him. Maybe the silence after each kill was his reward. And how did he vanish? That's the other half of the mystery, the part that keeps us up at night. 12 bodies in 4 years, 1935 to 1938. Then a slowdown, a fade, a quiet that felt too sudden. Did he die, his blade rusting in some unmarked grave? Did he move on, drifting with the Depression's tide to new cities, new rivers to stain red? Eliot Ness thought he'd gotten close with Francis Sweeney, the surgeon who crumbled but never confessed. Sweeney died in 1964, locked away in an asylum, his secrets, if he had them, buried with him. Frank Dolezal, the butcher who confessed and recanted, hanged in his cell in 1939, a convenient end that explained nothing. Or maybe the killer was neither, just a face in the crowd, a nobody who slipped away when the heat grew too strong. Cleveland stopped finding torsos, but did the killing stop, or did he get better at hiding them? Ness carried that failure to his grave. He'd beaten Capone, made headlines, built a legend, but the torso murderer broke him in a way Chicago never could. He chased leads, Sweeney, the raids, the ashes of Kingsbury Run, but came up empty, his hands tied by a lack of proof and a killer too careful to catch. The case became his white whale, an obsession that shadowed his later years. He'd talk about it sometimes, late at night over drinks, his voice low, his eyes distant, wondering if he'd missed something, if the answer had been right there. Cleveland moved on, or pretended to, as the Depression gave way to war and new struggles. But Ness couldn't. The Mad Butcher was the one that got away, the stain he couldn't wash off. The city felt it too, a scar that time couldn't erase. Kingsbury Run was bulldozed, its shacks replaced by roads and warehouses. But the name still chills those who remember. Older folks passed down the stories, tales of headless bodies, of a killer who walked among them, of a fear that locked doors and dimmed lights. The Cuyahoga River flows cleaner now, its banks tamed. But some swear they feel it watching, holding secrets it won't give up. The death masks, plaster casts of the unidentified, sat in a museum for years, their blank eyes staring out, a plea for names that never came. Their relics now, artifacts of a terror that shaped Cleveland's soul, a reminder that some wounds don't heal, they just fade into the background. True crime buffs keep the case alive, poring over yellowed files, chasing clues that crumbled decades ago. They debate Sweeney's guilt. Was he too broken to be that careful? Or was his breakdown the perfect mask? They dig into Dolezal's death. Was it murder to silence him? Or just a drunk's despair? They map the killings, linking them to crimes in other states, Pennsylvania, California, wondering if the Mad Butcher roamed further than we know. Books get written, podcasts get recorded, forums buzz with theories, but the answers stay out of reach. The case is a magnet for the curious, a riddle that hooks you and won't let go. Every new angle feels like it could crack it until it doesn't, and you're back where you started, staring at those torsos in your mind. What's left is the legacy, not a solution, but a story. The Cleveland torso murderer wasn't caught, wasn't named, wasn't stopped by force or brilliance. He faded or died or kept going, and we'll never know which. That's his power. The not knowing, the space he carved out in history by leaving nothing behind but questions. He turned a city into a haunted house, its streets a map of his work, its people a chorus of what-ifs. Ness couldn't beat him, Cleveland couldn't bury him, and time couldn't erase him. He's a shadow that stretches beyond 1938, beyond Kingsbury Run, into every corner where the dark feels too close. So what do you think? Was he Sweeney, giggling in his hospital bed as the world searched? A drifter, cutting his way across America, lost to the wind? Or someone we'll never name? A nobody who outsmarted us all? The death masks don't tell, the river doesn't confess, and the files just pile up, thousands of pages, zero closure. This is the Cleveland torso murderer, a phantom who danced with death and slipped into the night, leaving us to pick up the pieces, or what's left of them. His story doesn't end with a bang or a gavel. It ends with us here now wondering. Tell me below, what's your theory? Who was the Mad Butcher and where did he go? Did he die in Cleveland's muck, or live to laugh at us all? If you're hooked on the unknown, if this nightmare's got its claws in you, stick around. The next mystery's waiting, and it's just as dark, just as deep. We've walked through the bodies, the hunt, the guesses, and now the aftermath. This is where it lands, not an answer, but a challenge. What do you see in the shadows he left behind?